Hooggeachte vergadering, as announced, I will speak to you in something which should be English. Or at least close to it. Yesterday, President Obama visited this country. And the day before, he visited the other part of our country, the Kingdom of the Netherlands. And I'm not sure whether he asked for it or whether it was proposed by the Dutch Prime Minister, Mr. Rutte. But the most important moment, I think, in the visit of President Obama to the Kingdom of the Netherlands was visiting the place where, out of the National Archives from The Hague, the Dutch Declaration of Independence, the Plakkaat van Verlatingen, was shown to him. And it was evidently either asked or proposed to him because the Plakkaat van Verlatingen was, to some extent, to a large extent, at least ideologically, maybe not literally, the model for the American Declaration of Independence. To which extent is a scientific debate. Whether Jefferson knew the text of the Dutch Declaration is not sure. I hope to find that out someday. I have the catalogue of all the books of the Jefferson Library and I'm trying to find them all to see what was in these books, but that's for another moment in time. The Plakkaat van Verlatingen. And basically that's what we are discussing about. Whether Scotland, Catalonia, Flanders have the same right to secede as the United States had, as the Dutch provinces took when they seceded from Spain. And I would like to ask your attention and express my opinion on 3 points. First, well, maybe that's a bit too strong, but nevertheless, the necessity of secession. Or maybe, let me say it a little bit less radical, the attractiveness of secession and its relationship with the European Union. Secondly, the right to secede, and thirdly, the consequences and the effects in a European context and the membership of the European Union. First, well, I don't have to convince this audience, I think, that there may be good reasons to secede, at least for some countries and regions in Europe where I say countries and regions because we tend to consider Flanders still as a region in political terms, even when I said that once to a Scottish colleague and used the word region for Scotland, he was furious, said, no, we are not a region, we are a country and we have regions. So maybe the same thing for Flanders. But the first objection, or the main objection we always get in a European political context, is that there is a contradiction between secession and the process of Europe, of the European Union. And my point is that there is no contradiction at all, that the one is the logical consequence of the other. Why is there a need and an urge for secession? The main reason is the European Union and European process. It's not the opposite. The main reason, I said, basically the 2 main reasons. To use a fashionable expression, the European Union is as well the pull as the push factor for secession. The 2 reasons to secede are consequences of the Union. On the one hand, the success of the European Union in securing a common market, in securing certain freedoms, in securing many other things, takes away the dangers of secession. There is no reason anymore to be afraid of secession if the effect of secession is not the same as it would have been before the European Union was there. Because the effect of secession does not terminate the free movement of persons, the free movement of goods and services, the free movement of judgments. The effect of secession would not establish the same type of borders as those we had before the European Union. So the main reasons against secession, namely creating these small little markets again, is no longer there. That is the pull factor. I can dwell on that at length, but my time is short and your time is short, and my colleague has some very interesting things to say too. The second reason why secession is a logical consequence of the European Union is the push factor. The more important the European Union becomes, the more important it is to be a member state, at least when you're in. There may be good reasons to stay out, but at least when you're governed by it, you should be a member state and not simply a region of a member state. Because if you're not a member state, you're not taken seriously, you're not sitting around the right tables, or you're only sitting there in second rank, or only now and then, as you may know, one of the main institutions of the European Union, which is very symbolic in this respect, is the Council. And in the Council, who sits in the Council? The governments of the member states. And I know that Belgium has a kind of special position that when we don't have a federal minister with competences in certain fields, like take education, well, he cannot sit there because there's nothing to say, and then evidently a so-called regional minister will sit there, but only in turn. Flemish minister will come, next time there will be a Walloon minister, and so on. And if they don't agree with each other, they can't vote. So if you're not a member state, you do not really have a right to vote. You do not really have a right to participate in decision making. So the European Union is the reason why it is necessary to secede. Do we have a right to secede? I know international custom is not very clear. There are arguments in international law for and against. But is there anything international law is clear on? Is there anything where there is unanimity in international law? I don't believe so. So if we look at the different documents and text, yes, there is some variation, but there are very good arguments in favor of the right to self-determination, including so-called external self-determination. If we go back to the founding document of the modern international legal order, the Charter of the United Nations, San Francisco, 1945, which, by the way, I have no merit in it, but don't blame for me either, was signed by my grandfather in the name of the Kingdom of Belgium. You have the right of self-determination of peoples in this document, which was in the tradition of the League of Nations, the Declaration of President Wilson, 1916, the Convention of Montevideo, 1933, not very well known, but it has never been abolished, and gives this right of secession in more clear terms than some other documents. And evidently that goes back, has a long-standing tradition, we could say basically, to the Westphalian Treaties of 1648, who did recognize the secession of the Netherlands and Switzerland, finally, in the whole European concert. If you look at the UN Conventions on Human Rights, 1966, they again recognized this right to secede. And certainly it's not the European Union which is well placed to deny the right to secede. The majority of member states of the European Union proceeded from secession. Many of them even in quite recent years. Some, evidently, you have to go back to the Plakkaat van Verlatingen if you want to take the moment of secession of the Netherlands. For Belgium, you only have to go back to 1830, 1831, and for some other countries to 1991 or even later. And the European Union made a declaration after the Yugoslav secession 1991, and Slovenia and Croatia became, after being breakaway republics, became member states of the Union, which is an even clearer case than the case of the Czech and Slovak Republic, because they were not really breakaway, then they decided together to dissolve the country. Well, what we see, and what is the main objection always, is these countries seceded before they became member states of the Union. But if we think through this argument, this is very discriminatory. This means that there is no equal right for people to secede before or after their being part of the Union. How can we discriminate in the right of secession between those peoples who were already under the EU and those still outside? There is no justification to discriminate the ones against the other, to discriminate the Scots and the Catalans in relation to the Lithuanians and the Latvians, and the Estonians, and the Czechs, and the Slovaks, and the Slovenes, and the Croatians. And to some extent, well, no, they seceded before that, I could say Malta and Cyprus, and going further back, Ireland, evidently, Norway, Finland, well, Norway is not a member state, Sweden, that's going back to the 16th century, I recognize, but nevertheless. So if there is a right to secession, there must be an equal right to secession. If there's a right to apply for membership or to be a member, there must be equal for people within and without the Union. Does secession imply continuing membership of the Union if the seceding region state wants that, at least? Evidently, if they don't want and the others don't want either, then there's no problem. But let's suppose that we think that we are better in than out, and there may be good reasons to stay out, but there are still better reasons to stay in. If we presume that, again, we hear declarations by officials of the European Union and others who've probably especially tried to influence the fate of referenda in certain regions in the Union, like the Scottish one. This is undue interference, evidently with the will of the people, but nevertheless, they have no basis in international law, no firm basis in the European Union treaties either. There is nothing about that. I would say if you find something in international law, it's rather the opposite. Several countries who seceded were members who seceded from states being member of international organizations were automatically member of those organizations. It's true that United Nations, usually they were asked to apply for membership again, but in many other of these UN organizations, membership simply continued. When the Soviet Union was breaking down, the succeeding republics were automatically considered to be member of most organizations. And if you look at the most standard document on this, the Vienna Convention, which deals with succession of states, it starts from the basic principle that treaties remain in force in relation to the breakaway state. Evidently, you can terminate a treaty, but what the Union cannot do along these principles is to terminate the European Union treaty only in relation to Scotland. When it's terminated, then it's terminated for everyone. Then it's over. And they will never do that. If they don't want to terminate the treaty, it remains in force, but it will have to be renegotiated, evidently. Evidently, because there is no seat in the Council. There is no allocated number of seats in European Parliament. There is no judge in the European Court of Justice. That is true. It's not an ideal position to remain in the Union not on equal footing. That is to be negotiated, but you're not automatically out as they pretend. And moreover, much more importantly is, for the citizens, there is no legal ground on which, in case of secession, the citizens can be deprived of their European Union citizenship. There is case law of the European Court of Justice which makes this clear, that you cannot simply be deprived of European citizenship on several grounds. And I think that this case would fit in the case law of the ECG. So yes, it is necessary and attractive. Yes, we have the right. And yes, this has implications for the European Union which go much further than those accepted by Barroso, Van Rompuy and other scaremongers, at least in relation to the Scottish people. Thank you for your attention.
Ik had hier veiligheidshalve nog een glas klaarstaan, maar het wordt niet gebruikt. Dus I have a glass of water if you need some during the speech, but you can always run to your spot, of course. But there's one here for you.